This is going to be a kind of unscripted tutorial on how to create a character using the Advanced Roleplay System in Foundry with the OSRIC content module. And we're on from the player side now, so all of that is configured mostly on the DM side, and I'll have a tutorial for that at some point, but from here we're going to start with the character. The GM has already given us like a character sheet, set a token to it, and we're going to set some stats, and you roll it however you want. I'm just going to set some values here. He's going to be an elf. Actually, you're still going to be a magic user too, so we'll start with that, just some basic stats. There's several tabs up in here, and the one we want to go to open a character sheet, you can either double click on the token on the map, or you can go up here and double click on the character that you can see. We've already got this open, but you can see that. This is the combat tab, which we'll cover later. This is the item tab. For now, what we're going to do is we want to add a race and a class, since we've already got our stat set. And to do that, you can either manually go in, find the class, and drag or drop, or you can use the item browser, which is what I would recommend. This lets you filter a little better things that you need to look up. Like example, we'll do spells later, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But in this case, we want to find, the first thing we want to do is we want to add a race. And we're looking for a race. We got an elf. So there's a couple of buttons here. This one will let you look at it, see what it is, what it does. This one will let you take it. You don't have to pay for it. You just take it. And if it had a cost, you could buy it. Since it's a race, you don't buy any of that stuff. That would be more for food and weapons and stuff. So we're just going to take the elf race. And you'll notice now that we now have all this bright light, and that's because the race itself granted us a lot of things, some of which are effects that give him vision and various other things like infravision. This is specific to OSRIC here. It may be different depending on what system you're using. We can go to the details tab now, and you can see the elf race is now here. You could edit it if you needed to. You'll also notice there are some effects up here in this effects section. Infravision, base move, elf, racial ability modifiers. So if you'll notice, right now his dex is 17 now. It was 16, and his con has went down by 1. You can go over here and you can see this is what's modifying that. If you ever need to modify your ability scores, the way Foundry works is if you have an effect that modifies these numbers and you try to change them, it won't work correctly. You'll have to go over here, toggle and this disables it. You go back and notice, oh, they're back to what their base values were before we added the race. And so you're good. You can make your changes, like if we wanted to add, for whatever reason, we added 1 to strength. We go back, and now they're back to normal. But if you made that change, the value wouldn't stick, and it would kind of start messing with the other numbers. And so if you want to edit your ability scores, you need to toggle that off. The other thing is this infravision one. Depending on the situation, you may or may not need to disable it. I don't know what you need it for, but you can toggle it off, and you can see, now you can't see. So we'll leave it on. So another thing we want to do is add a class. In this case, he's going to be a fighter magic user because that's pretty much what I play. And also lets us see a couple things. So the first time you add these, it doesn't add the levels of them. It just adds the classes, which does nothing. They'll show here, but it doesn't do anything. You have to add a level of them to actually implement some of the features that they have. So in this case, We're going to add fighter. It adds some skills, some abilities, and things. And it rolled some hit points. We're going to do the same thing with magic user. And I got 4 hit points. You can now see he has green bar here. Now he has health. His hit points are 6. You also notice his AC is 7, and that's because he has a dexterity modifier up here of -3. But if you ever want to go back and look and see, oh, what did I roll at level 1 with my fighter? You can go in here and see, oh, he rolled 8 hit points. And your GM can change this value. So if your GM wants you guys to start off with max hit points, which is what I normally do, your GM can edit this. You can't. But from the GM side, he can edit that and then set it to 10. And then go over here and look at your wizard and set that to max. In this case, it's already max. And you'll notice down here also, he has 1 spell slot in the arcane section. That means he has a level 1 spell. Something else that you'll need to see is proficiencies and abilities. These are things that are added because of race and skill or class. In this case, all these elf things here are all from the race that we picked. We had some other things that were added: fighting unskilled and bonus damage. These are some things that were added because we added the fighter class. Down here you can see some skills that were added because we're an elf. And if you go to combat tab, you can see it kind of filters out the things that you need. In this case, here's the 2, it calls them skills, but they're basically abilities. At least in this case, if your elf ever needs to roll to hear a noise, or if you're a thief, you'll have some other skills here, or if you use non-weapon proficiencies like 1st and 2nd edition do, they would show up here, and you would click them like this, and then you'll get this little pop-up over here, and you can read all this. It's here so you can look at it if you need it. If you don't, you can close it back up. But what we're going to do is we're going to click skill. This is going to be kind of a standard pop-up that you're going to get. You can set the dice visibility here, and it'll do it for just this roll. You can also set it down here. This is a Foundry thing so that they all show up here all the time. Depends on how you want. Situation modifiers, if for whatever reason you have a modifier to this ability or to the skill check, you would put that number in there. Just a straight number or -2 or -6, whatever it is, and then hit apply, and it'll roll. You'll get a noise that you failed or succeeded. In this case, you missed it by 64 on the roll. Something else you'll notice here is that we have a empty spell slot. We have no spells to pick from. So what we need to do is we need to get some gear. The first thing I want to do is start off with some containers. And in this case, let's give him some gold so you can see what it looks like when you buy things. And the way this works, if you buy things, is it's going to use the smallest currency you have to try to use that at first and work its way up. And then whenever it's done, if there's change generated from the way it took coins, it'll give you those back in return. So in this case, we're going to buy a backpack, which is 2 gold, and we have this, so I'll buy it. You can see down here, you bought a backpack, spent 200 copper to buy it. So instead of using your gold and your silver, it used your lowest currency and use that up first. So we got a backpack now. Something else we're going to want is a spell book, because this guy is a wizard, and his class is going to give him that, or I'm going to say it is, so he doesn't have to buy it. And this is in blue, and that's because it's magic, but it's also identified. So if it wasn't identified, you wouldn't see this blue color as a player. So now that we got these, let's go ahead and go to spells. Depending on your GM, you may get some spells that, oops, spelled that wrong. Your GM may give you some spells to pick from at first level. So I generally give my guys like 3 or 5 of them, in addition to read magic and detect magic. So I'm just going to let him pick a couple of spells. He doesn't need to buy them. he's just going to take them. And I'm only going to take a couple just so we can see what they look like. Something else that you need to know as a wizard, you'll notice there's a little learn tick box here on each spell. And this is, if you haven't learned it, it won't show up in the to memorize it. So we're going to learn Burning Hands and Charm Person, but not Detect Invisibility. So whenever we go back over here, you'll see you got Burn Hands, Charm Person. And if we want, we can memorize Burning Hands so we can use it later. Something else with items that are containers, you can drag them onto containers, drop them in there. So now you have your book with your spells. And if you click the book itself, the icon, it'll close it up. You can click it again, it'll open it up. And you can do the same thing once we put stuff in a backpack. You can actually put the spell book in the backpack. I don't want to do that right now. So some other gear we might need is a weapon. And let's see if we can find a longsword. I don't know if how your GM lets fighter mages be in your game, but in mine, I'll let them wield weapons. And in this case, he's going to take a longsword. You'll notice that it's saying, hey, do you want to add this to your elf proficiency longsword? What this will do is it'll automatically put the application of that proficiency to that weapon if you do that, and we want to do that. And the other thing I want to do is I want to get a long bow as well. So this is going to prompt you a couple of things, and I'll explain why it does what it does. So it's saying, do you want to combine the longbow with the longsword? And the reason it's doing that is the bow's name is bow, long. So what the thing is doing is it's trying to find familiar things. So like if you dragged and dropped arrows into your backpack, it'll say, hey, do you want to combine this with your other arrows? Normally, for that case, you'd say yes. In this case, we don't. It's trying to match as best it can things that are in your inventory. And so bow long matches sword long. And that's just the way he's got these named. In some cases, it may be called long sword and then long bow. And so they probably wouldn't match. So we don't want these to stack. And again, we've got another match here where it says bow long, and it's matching elf proficiency longsword. And that's not what we want to match on. We would want it to match on bow. And you can see later why it doesn't. We'll say no. If you go to proficiencies, you can see he's got this called elf bows, and that's actually a bow. And so it didn't match it. To manually add things that for proficiencies, for this to apply the +1 hit when you use a bow, you'd need to go to edit the proficiency itself and click that and then add it here. And now when you use the bow, it'll apply this modifier to it. If you have other things like specialization, I don't know, like 182 has double specializations and other things where they stack, so you can have multiple proficiencies and you just add the weapon to each one of them so that it applies to all of them. So now we've got our weapons, we've got our spell book, we can pick up some armor as well. And we'll take a small shield and chainmail. And it says I can't afford it. Oh well, so we'll buy some leather armor. Where's leather armor? And here, surely we can afford that. Yes, we can afford leather armor. So now we go back, you can see our armor class is adjusted for our dexterity, our shield, and our leather armor. You can also see now our weapons show up here. They also have these green checks. That means that you have a proficiency applied to them. If it shows up as red, that means you don't, and it'll give you the opportunity. If you click on it, it'll say, do you want to create a proficiency for this? And if it does, if you go here, then it'll be here, and it'll automatically have whatever it was applied for, listed as applied to that weapon. So let's see, we've got items. Now let's get some food to say some rations. I'm going to let him just take some just so I don't have to worry about the money right now. And the reason I want to do that is so we can show you how to drag and drop food and things into your backpack. You can do that. And you can do the same thing you can do with your spell book. You can click on the book or the icon and it'll close it or open it. And you can also stick spell book inside the backpack and then kind of make it look a little better. If you want to rearrange these things, you could like drag along sword up here, drag along bow down here. You know, move stuff around the way you want. But if you drop it on any container, it's going to throw it inside that. Anytime you put an item within a container, it won't be equipped. So like if you have stacks and stacks of armor and you put them in a backpack or something, it won't apply it. So if you mean to equip it, you need to have it outside of a container. If you want to have something just carried, you can toggle it. That's not carried. Now it's carried. So it means you're just kind of holding it. And it won't apply these stats. So you can see his armor class is now 6. If we go back to the gear and we equip it, you can now see his AC is 4. And that's kind of the basics of how to create a character. There's some description fields where you can change things, you know, basic stuff. Proficiencies, we've kind of covered that. You can edit these, manually add stuff if you need to. Generally, it would be attached to your class or your race. Depends on your games. Also in the details tabs, you have these blocks that kind of explain what your base abilities and scores are. Eventually, you will earn experience. That'll show up here, the total amount of experience that you've earned. If you haven't applied it to your classes, it'll show up in this section with a button that lets you apply it. And then once it's applied, it'll show as earned in here in each one of these. And the reason that XP is not automatically just dumped into these is it depends on your game. Some games, like dual classing, is a little strange. You lock a class. Like in this case, if we were locking class, it would not be active. But for now, we're doing multi-class. I'm not going to cover that really, but just suffice it to say, your experience earned is how much you've earned completely. Whether it's been applied or not is irrelevant. It's just going to be your total earned. And once you, the XP here that shows up as applied or unapplied, would be put into your active classes when you apply it. So if you only had one class, it would apply to just one. You got 2, it's going to split it and put it between the 2. Certain classes may need to have some modifiers to a bonus. These are percentile bonuses. Like if you have high intelligence, some games will give you a 10% XP bonus. You'd put 10 in that value right there. And so when you applied it, it would give a 10% bonus application of whatever it got at that point. So you can have that on the magic user and not on the fighter, so your XP values would vary at that point. The stuff that you've earned. If you ever need to make a strength check, and you would mouse over these ability scores for strength, dex, con, so those sort of things, you can click on it, and what it'll do is it'll roll a d20, and if the score is below your ability score, you'll succeed. It'll tell you how much you succeed by. I don't know if that's an Ostrich thing, but it is a 1E, 2E thing, and other games within the same genre. You do saves the same way. Just click on the name. And he failed. So there's also spells sometimes that whenever you cast them on if you target a goblin and you're trying to charm it, or you're trying to do something that causes them to have a save, depending on how the system has configured that spell, it can automatically force the creature to make a save. So like if you cast, like I said, charm person on someone, it would automatically force them to make a save versus spells, so they wouldn't have to roll. Depending on your GM, he may let you roll manually, but in the case of the spell automatically doing it, it allows the system to, if it's like an AoE, you would target multiple things and then click cast, and it would make them all save, and those that did save, it would unselect them so that whenever you applied an effect to those, it would only apply it to those that didn't save. Also, if you have, say, Fireball, and you selected a bunch of targets, and it would remember who saved and who didn't, so that whenever you did the damage, the ones that saved would only take half, and the ones that didn't would take full damage. So those are some reasons that you need to have spells manage the saves in certain cases. Sometimes they don't, but again, that's going to be dependent on the system. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to go into just a brief little kind of combat scenario. I talked about the combat tab earlier, and so the goblin and Neebs is already in the combat tracker. Normally the way I play is I will right click this cross swords up here to pop out the little combat tracker here. And you can see it's got the goblin and it's got Neebs. If you have a creature like this that's over, like say behind a tree, and your character can't see it, it won't show up in the combat tracker. So things may be a little weird that somebody may see the guy and he can say, I'm going to attack the orc behind the tree. And you can say, I don't see it. Well, yeah, you can't see it. He can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to the GM side and I'm going to begin combat. And you can see the goblin has, you saw a dice roll, or maybe you didn't. Depends on how the GM has that set up. So normally, in kind of simple systems for initiative, you would just click this dice and roll initiative. In other variants, the way it might work, depending on how the GM has the rule set configured, it may allow you to like click on this bow. If you haven't rolled here, if you clicked your bow, it would pop up an initiative rolling pop-up. In this case, I've not enabled that because most systems probably are going to use a simple sort of initiative. 1A2 variants may or may not, and again, it's all dependent on the GM. But just want you to be aware that sometimes your GM may have that, and he would say, so click the weapon you're going to use for your initiative, and it would roll initiative for that. And then when it's your turn, then you would click the weapon to do the attack and all that. Same thing with spells. Those things would be, so, and in fact, if you click the Burning Hands and that was enabled, it would roll initiative for Burning Hands. It would also toggle this little wand here, and that would mean you're casting. So that if you're hit before your spell goes off, there'll be a little alert that says, your casting was interrupted in the chat. And whether your GM uses that or not, it's up to them. It won't stop you from doing anything. It won't automatically use your spell. That's between you and your GM to decide. But all that aside, normally what you're going to do is you're just going to click that dice. It's going to pop up this little window, and if you want to manually say, yes, I'm casting spell, you could toggle that. If you have any modifiers, you'd apply those. And you can see it's Neeb's turn. And you get a little indicator that it's his turn. So we've got the GM connected and a player. So we're going to get the alerts from both of them. So it may be a little confusing. But normally what will happen is you'll only hear sounds for your initiative and various things like that. So it's your turn. To target, you mouse over it and you press T. And he's going to use his longsword and attack. I'll go back to the chat tab, and you can see he missed with his sword. The GM can see how much you missed by. So like if he has a modifier in his head, it's like, oh, so you actually hit him. He can tell you that, and then you can roll damage. We're going to do it again so that we can see it actually hit. Hopefully it'll hit, and he didn't. So we're going to do it again, and we're going to give him a +5 modifier because we want to see it hit once. There we go. So now you can hear that it hit. You can also mouse over the roll here, and you can see Proficiency modifier gave you a +1. The situational gave you a +5. And so remember that elf with the longsword modifier proficiency we had, and it's adding this right here. So that makes sense. And we actually hit. We can roll damage and kill him, or we can also pretend it's next round, and we can do Burning Hands. So if you click Burning Hands, you'll see it pops up this little chat card with a cast, an effect, and a damage. These are the things that are dependent on however it is that the GM configured it, or how, in this case, how Ostrich does it. You can also open it up, read the entire text of the spell if you need to. In this case, we're just going to click cast because we've already got him selected. I guess there is no save for this. There is an effect, Burning Hands duration, and there is also a damage. So in this case, we're just going to do the damage. and it applied 1 fire damage to the goblin. And you can't see the goblin's health. The GM can see that, but you can see when they die. Depending on your GM, he may let you see the hit points go down or up. That's up to him. But in this case, we're gonna do another sword attack, and that's gonna show up as a fumble because it rolled a 1. And if those roll a 20, you'll see it show up as critical hit. Oh wow! So yeah, you can see that. Some systems will allow you to do double damage, and or if you fumble, there may be some silly side effects. It really depends on your GM. But you'll notice whenever you roll damage, you get this style, and you can set, like if your GM lets you get ×2 damage on a critical hit, you can put that on maximum damage or half damage or whatever. It really depends on your game system. We're just going to do double damage just for fun. And it killed the goblin. So that should kind of give you a good idea of how to play a character, make a character from the start. There's obviously a lot of other things you can do. There's an option, if you look down here at the bottom left, there's a request trade. You can request trade with people. What I will do with this video is put in some timeline indicators so that you can jump to one section to another and make it a lot easier and kind of jump to